Thank you, Dr. Rob. Thank you so much for joining us. You are the Chief Veterinary Officer for Real Mushrooms, and we've had so much interest in this talk because people do want to know, people don't know much about mushrooms and how they can benefit health. So thank you so much for taking the time to join us and maybe answer some questions. I have got some questions that people gave me prior to this conversation, but maybe could you possibly please talk about yourself and what you do, and just give us a little bit of background first before we get started.
Well, I've been around a while, and I graduated from vet school in 1982, so it's over 40 years of practice experience. And shortly after graduating from vet school, I thought I knew everything I needed to know to do battle with those nasty diseases out in the trenches. But after a couple of years, I started getting frustrated with the tools I had been given. I started to look for more answers of other tools I could use. And I looked at diet, and I looked at herbal, and I studied acupuncture and studied Chinese herbal medicine, and just started putting together kind of a set of tools that I could use to address animals to try to deal with some of these complicated, complex, chronic diseases that conventional medicine does not have very good tools for. And I'm a very strong advocate of good quality, correctly practiced conventional medicine. I think the reason it's gotten such a bad rap from many people is that it's not really practiced appropriately, and blending the best of complementary and alternative therapies with the best of conventional medicine, to me, brings the best to your pet, depending, of course, on what the problem is. So originally, and I'm really interested in these emerging therapies. I got very interested in cannabis around 2015 when it got more legal here in the U.S. and lectured extensively on it, became known as a bit of an expert in that area. And then mushroom products started to be more available, and I became aware of the fact, first of all, I've always known how great mushrooms are from my work in Chinese medicine, but there weren't really good products around for a while that we could then, and good raw materials that were organic and well processed and everything else. And so I became aware that there were such products, but the big problem is there's very little research in veterinary species. Most of it's in laboratory animals and humans, and we have, hundreds of years of anecdotal information supporting the value of mushrooms, but we don't really have specific objective information about how to use them in pets. So that's been my mission these last couple of years, and that was one reason I joined Real Mushrooms, because they're one of the global leaders in mushroom cultivation, and are very strong in terms of promoting education about mushrooms. And the reason is because although mushrooms are fairly simple, you go to the grocery store, see a good mushroom, you bring it home, cook it, and eat it. That's pretty simple. But understanding more about the details of it, and especially how you can apply specific mushrooms and how do you apply specific mushrooms to specific problems our pets get, that's really the nut that I've been trying to crack. And I'm getting there. It takes time. I've done a couple of little pilot studies to explore like cordyceps in horses and cordyceps in cats and things like that. But still, we're still learning, still growing. And whatever I say this year, next year, I've got even more to say, so invite me back. That's basically who I am. And I think that we really need to share our successes and our failures in using mushrooms, in public forums like these. And so I'm very interested in hearing personal experiences if you've had successes or failures with specific mushrooms. Now, when we talk about the word mushroom, it's kind of a general term. And yet when you talk about a mushroom product, there's a lot of different varieties of how mushrooms are processed or manufactured into retail products, and not all products are the same. And which part of the mushroom, how they process it, these are important considerations when it comes to choosing a product that's going to work. And of course, one reason I'm with Real Mushrooms is because they do the job right. But I don't really, and as much as I think it's a great company and you should know about it, and it's more, and it is becoming more accessible in other parts of the world. It's a Canadian company, but we do sell through distributors down under in Australia, New Zealand, and in Europe. So, it's becoming more accessible globally as well. But I'm sure there are other companies as well that are doing the job right, hopefully. And so I'm not saying that it's the only products that you can use, but they are very reliable products that are consistent and you can depend upon. So that's kind of my thing.
Yeah. And talking about having more dialogue about mushrooms, I know you've just published your book. There's a mushroom for that.
I have, yes.
What that is?
Give me a second. Sorry, we ran out of them, and it just came in this morning, and I was shipping out more of them. But here's what the book looks like. It's pretty big. It's like 405 pages. It's got a really good index to it, and in it, and actually it's not just about mushrooms. I also put all of my information about cannabis in it as well. And I had written a book in 2015, Medical Marijuana and Your Pet, but that has become outdated. So I also updated all of that information and put it in here. And what I've done is I've used a platform of 8 stories about pets I've treated with mushrooms, with cannabis, with integrative medicine, with conventional medicine, as illustrations about specific disease categories like allergies and arthritis and anxiety and digestive disorders and cancer and epilepsy. I think that's it, and wellness. And I tell stories, and I think storytelling, I've learned, even when I'm teaching and even when I'm in the exam room, really hammers home the information much better than just giving you the data. So and I think they're pretty good stories. And although I'm not a writer, I didn't think I was a writer. A lot of people who have read it, are telling me that they're really enjoying it, that it's a pleasant read, and that it's answering a lot of the questions they've had. It's well organized, and so. Oh, it's cool. And it's available on Amazon. And Amazon, if you use your local Amazon, wherever you're located, it will, I think that you can purchase it that way in any country through Amazon, because they have this, because it's a Kindle prints it. And so they do that worldwide. And so that makes it very accessible. So ordering it through Amazon is the best way to go. And did I give you a link, Ness, to the...
Yeah.
Okay, good. So you'll display that, and people can try to get their hands on it. It's real good. I want to use it. I want to start, now that I've gotten that published, I'm going to start doing some kind of online platforms for people that are interested in discussing mushrooms some more. I want to use the book as kind of a platform. We can maybe discuss certain chapters or certain diseases or certain issues, and not be really long-winded, but kind of short little presentations. And what I really want to see happening is a Q&A. Is having this interaction with people that are interested in using mushrooms in pets and myself, so that we can all learn more from each other, because I don't hold all the answers, but as a community, we do. And I think that's really what I want. I'm just trying to figure out how to do that platform. And, I'm a vet. I'm just still learning how to do all this online crap.
Yeah. It's not that easy. It's a learning curve, that's for sure.
You're doing pretty well.
Here we are. We're talking about Q&As here. So that's awesome. So, yeah, so I guess when we're talking about the mushroom, we need to know what their active constituent is, because I'm assuming it's going to vary from mushroom to mushroom, and some mushrooms are appropriate for certain things and other mushrooms are inappropriate for certain things. With that.
Well, all mushrooms have the same basic categories of ingredients, but it's but it changes from species to species, and so there is a similarity, and in many cases, almost any mushroom could be used for a number of different general kinds of problems. For instance, the cell wall of the mushroom or the fungus, which is very sturdy. It's very fibrous, but the actual fibrous nature of the cell wall is part of the immune modulating activity of mushrooms. And all mushrooms have these same very sturdy fibrous cell walls that contain these compounds called beta glucans and other compounds called chitin. And the beta glucan compounds will directly directly connect and contact cells of the immune system and kind of turns them on. It tells them, hey, there might be a threat coming around. You got to get your protective defensive mechanisms up and running. And we can find that with any mushroom can do that. Even those little white button mushrooms that you buy at the supermarket that are so common that you might even find sliced raw in a salad bar. There's copious good quality studies showing its benefit for prostate and breast and a variety of other problems. So it's just those little white button mushrooms. So as long as the mushroom is not toxic and you can consume it either edibly or you can dry it and powder it and put it in boiling water for a little while to kind of break down that fibrous cell wall. We call that a hot water extraction. Almost any mushroom will work. But you're right, Ness, because specific mushrooms will we've discovered that specific mushrooms can have specific actions. And some of it is that this is what we've learned. Some of it is we don't know, we haven't tested all the mushrooms for every single action. So it's possible that even though we don't have a study showing a mushroom works for something, it might. Because we don't have the study doesn't mean it doesn't work. It's like if a tree falls in the forest and no one hears it, did it fall or not? Well, they still
It'll
work.
make a noise.
Yeah. And then those are only two of the compounds. I'm fond of calling mushrooms the Swiss Army knife of supplements because they have so many little tools you can pull out to use for this or to use for that. Just like cannabis, mushrooms have terpenes in them. And the terpenes in cannabis describe a lot of the activity, certainly some of the odor of cannabis. Now, the terpenes in mushrooms are much larger than the terpenes in cannabis, so they're not as volatile. So you don't really smell them. You kind of get that umami taste and smell with mushrooms, but you don't really get the terpene smell that we're familiar with the smaller terpenes in cannabis. But these terpenes are very, very powerful. The lion's mane mushroom, for instance, which globally is a lot of people have interest in for its benefit to cognitive function, its benefit to memory, its benefit to stress and other kinds of neurologic conditions, especially in the central nervous system. A lot of the potency of the lion's mane mushroom comes through the terpenes, not through the beta glucans. But the beta glucans also power a lot of the lion's mane. Before we learned about the neurologic benefit of lion's mane, historically, lion's mane was used for digestive problems, and which is interesting. And a lot of that has to do, I think, with the fiber in it. The fiber in mushrooms, amazingly, is also considered to be a prebiotic for the microbiome. And we're learning more and more the microbiome kind of rules everything, when it comes to health and disease. So the mushrooms are great food for the microbiome, plus the beta glucans in the mushrooms will help to regulate the good bugs versus the bad bugs in the microbiome. So it's, we're just still learning so much about it. And I hope I'm not going too fast.
No. So talking about learning, so we're having a lot of rain here at the moment, and there's all sorts of fungi
Nice.
popping out of the lawn. Now, I'm assuming you're not going to recommend that I go out there and start picking up some.
Your assumption is correct. Too much liability in that suggestion.
Yeah.
I mean, if a person were expert, at identifying mushrooms, then, foraging for mushrooms can be a safe event. But there are so many mushroom poisonings, every year in every country. In Germany, in Europe, where there's a big tradition of mushroom foraging, the ERs in Germany, actually, all of them stock antidotes to the Amanita mushroom poisoning, which is the most poisonous of all the mushrooms. Interestingly enough, the antidote to Amanita mushroom poisoning is found in the milk thistle plant.
Right. Oh,
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. Very curious. Actually has a specific antidote for the toxin found in Amanita. So they've got injectable forms of milk thistle in German ERs because it's so common. But I think you're better off buying mushrooms that have
Yeah,
identified, either at
I
the
think you're
grocery
right.
store, or through a company that is selling them and labeling them. And there is adulteration of mushrooms in the industry as well. And Real Mushrooms has been pioneering these analytical techniques that use some DNA imprinting and some high pressure thin layer chromatography to improve our authentication and identification of mushrooms, to make sure that we're not getting that what is on the label is what's in the bottle too.
So before we get to the questions, I just want to give you some feedback from some of the people that came through about mushrooms or the company Real Mushrooms. So Pam says her border collie is on turkey tail for try and pronounce this, hemangiosarcoma. 19 months ago, she was given 1 to 2 days left to live by the vet, and she's still growing strong and shows no sign of anything wrong.
Nice. Good for you, Pam. Yeah, there was a study, actually, a very good quality study that looked at 100 dogs over a period of nearly 10 years that had hemangiosarcoma, that they gave a special extract of turkey tail to, and they did find that it was very, very helpful. They weren't, in this study, they weren't able to show that it was equivalently as good or better than chemotherapy, but they did show that if it was used with chemotherapy in this study, that it had the longest prolongation of life.
Wow.
Pam, 19 months it's a blessing. It's great.
Yeah, isn't it amazing? Karen says my dog gets almost 2 years. I get almost 2 years mushroom supplement. That's why I'm sure his lympho cancer is for 2 years now in remission.
Nice. So we're hearing some very positive feedback. Yeah, lymphosarcoma, lymphoma, also a bloodborne type of cancer can be very responsive to mushrooms.
Yeah.
These glucans and these terpenes are very powerful.
Yeah. Janelle just says that she loves your products, and she and her family uses them all the time. Yeah, so that's good. Yeah.
And I think what's cool about that is that really this is a shared kind of a product. Not just our pets, but we should be taking them ourselves. We should learn from successes with our pets, or they should learn from the successes with us. And many of these products, especially the powders or just the pure single mushroom capsules, can be shared, very easily.
Yeah. Yeah. And I had a question, because as you know, I work with separation anxiety cases, and you did touch on this already, but I'd like to get a little bit more into the weeds, if that's the right thing. The gut-brain connection, the microbiome. We know that some, anxiety can start in the gut. So I guess my question was, before you mentioned that they can help with anxiety, is can mushrooms help with anxiety?
Well, they can, and going back to lion's mane, which is really probably what we would focus on first when we're talking about anxiety types of problems. There was a study recently published coming out of Japan in which they just dried the lion's mane and powdered it and put it as a top dressing on kibble, which isn't really the best diet out there for pets, and they saw very good improvements in the microbiome. So that's where you get into this whole, I think, this gut-brain health thing. And this is one reason why lion's mane was known for its ability to improve digestion, probably because of the same brain-gut axis. Now, separation anxiety, as you well know, is very complicated and can be very, very deep-seated, and feeds off of many cues that the pet parents have created in their lives with their pets that cue them in that they're leaving, and they get wound up before you even leave, and that's an issue. So things like lion's mane can be helpful, especially if you use them on like a daily basis to kind of lower the noise to some extent. And then perhaps if you're leaving the house and that's going to happen, and I'm sure you're teaching them how they have to do a whole process before they leave to extinguish those cues, then also giving them a higher dosage of the lion's mane in maybe the hour before your planned departure. It's a little bit of a pain in the butt to do that, but that could be very helpful. And I think if you could combine CBD with the lion's mane, if it's available to you legally in the country that you're at, then I see a lot of synergy between the two. And one reason is these terpenes I'm talking about that are part of what powers the lion's mane activity signal. They bind with the same membrane receptors, like the serotonin receptors in the brain, that cannabis and CBD bind to as well. And so you get kind of this kind of double whammy, using both together and staging it so that you keep a maintenance level, and then you use a higher level just before an event that could be stressful, maybe thunderstorms, fireworks, company coming over, visit to the groomers, whatever the issue is, that's a stressful issue for your critter.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Barbara has said that she has some experience with medicinal mushrooms. She started with what she learned in a naturopath course in Germany. Big successes with dogs. She says she uses mostly a 50-50 powdered and extract. Improved hearing in geriatric dogs, from being completely deaf to hearing the owner coming home. And she says that's Hericium. Is that a...
Hericium is lion's mane. That's just the botanical.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Improving liver function, reishi. I can't say these names.
Reishi. I think it's reishi. That's the Ganoderma mushroom, the mushroom of immortality, which has great value to the liver, as well as to settling their stress, because it's an adaptogen, and so it handles stress. Yeah.
And she uses that with milk thistle and arginine.
Smart.
In 1 month.
Probably arginine. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah. And in 1 month from liver enzymes from ×6 higher than normal to in the range.
Nice.
She's a few cases. Lupus in 2 dogs together with vet treatment, keeping symptoms calm using cordyceps and reishi.
Nice.
And she's also had a few bitches with different hormonal issues and used cordyceps, better cycle, almost no false pregnancies, sorry.
Both cordyceps and reishi are what we call true adaptogens. And true adaptogens, like ashwagandha as an herb, for instance, affect the brain and the adrenal glands, the pituitary gland, the hypothalamus, and the adrenal glands. And that's the definition of an adaptogen. But we know with cordyceps and with reishi both that they also have an impact on the sex hormones. And this is why we can see increased fertility, improved pregnancies, and outcomes that way, as well as, cordyceps has a reputation of being an aphrodisiac. So there's so many things out of China that are supposed to have aphrodisiacal properties, like rhinoceros horn or stuff like that. But what's interesting is when they study the effects of cordyceps on the hormones, they find that it does actually, in fact, increase testosterone levels when used regularly. And there's an interesting story that the yak Y-A-K, the yak herders in the high steppes of Bhutan, Nepal, and Tibet would notice in the springtime that when their yak were grazing on the grass, there also were some cordyceps mushrooms coming up out of the grass that they grazed on, and they would notice shortly after that the yaks would go into season. They'd start breeding, and they would have much better litters than they would when they were grazing from down below, where they weren't getting the cordyceps mushroom, which is how the cordyceps mushroom got its reputation for being an aphrodisiac. In fact, actually maybe a true one.
Wow. We might get on to some of these other questions, and then we'll go to anybody that's got questions. You can feel free to type them in the chat now, and we'll come to them in a minute.
Bring them on.
Yeah, so Alette, who is, sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. So some of these people can't join us, so they've sent through questions. So she's in South Africa. She listened to your interview on the summit. And became very interested and curious. Could you please ask the doctor how effective it is for storm phobia, as I have already tried everything under the sun for our 7-year-old Bruvia, adopted him at age 3.
Well, I think it can be effective, but there's going to be a difference from one animal to another, in terms of their nervous system, in terms of how deeply embedded that thunder phobia, that noise phobia is in them. I mean, dogs are extremely sensitive to sounds, and it could be, the sort of trigger that's like a PTSD trigger, when they hear that sort of loud sound, if they've associated historically with some other, terrible thing. So we have a couple of tools we can use. The tools that Nest teaches are great. We need to use those. You can't just give an animal a magic pill and expect that they're going to be better. The pills, the supplements really are tools. Actually, quite frankly, I think to enable the tools that Nest gives you to work better. And so we do see some benefit to it. The problem is oftentimes with thunder phobia that those storms that we can't even hear coming in, your dog's hearing is so acute that it's already hearing it before it happens. So you have to do something similar to what I was describing for separation anxiety, which is you need to create sort of a baseline of calming, whether it be the lion's mane, the CBD, which is not a bad choice to look at, on a daily basis, just to kind of lower the volume a little bit. And Ness knows, and many of you must know, that once a dog gets wound up with its excitement and with its nervousness, it's really hard to settle them down. That's why we want to catch them before they get wound up, if that's even possible. Sometimes it's the impossible dream. So that's why giving them a baseline can help to lower it, and maybe learning some other tools. Maybe you're using a counter noise or something in the house, or thunder phobia is probably one, I think, probably harder than separation anxiety, actually.
It's tough. Yeah.
Experience I've had trying to modify that. And then you want to use, then you can use a higher dosage of the lion's mane and the CBD. Now, in one product that I've created for Real Mushrooms, I put the lion's mane with the reishi, both of which are adaptogens and both of which have calming nature. Reishi's been used for centuries by Zen masters as a meditation aid because it's so centering and calming. But I also put tryptophan in there, and tryptophan, as we know, is a precursor to serotonin. And when you take tryptophan orally, it stimulates your body to produce serotonin, which is the calming neurotransmitter. So we've got the mushrooms, we've got the actual amino acids. I've got theanine from green tea. We've got some herbs that are calming. So something like this could be used, like maybe to give a higher dosage of what you need when you're anticipating that in an hour or so we're going to be getting some thunder or some fireworks or some other kind of noisy thing that our dogs don't like. My dog, he's got PTSD. He's got terrible anxiety. And when my cats, who aren't that mannerful, jump up on the countertop, sometimes I'll raise my voice at them, sometimes without even thinking, and just kind of reaction. He vanishes. He goes away. Any loud noise, he thinks that someone's yelling at him.
Oh.
So it's noise phobias are difficult. That's
sure. It is tough. Yeah. Glenda says, I would love to find something to help my sweet boy with polyneuropathy, and I'm going to spell this because I'm going to say it wrong.
Okay, what is it?
LARYNGEAL, paralysis.
Yes, a lot. We also call that LARPAR, laryngeal paralysis, and I think they have a name, GOLPP or something, which is
right.
So
he's on lion's mane, but not sure how much it has helped. He cannot bark anymore.
Right, and probably has a pretty hoarse voice and has difficulty breathing at times, especially when he gets excited, and that can actually be really dangerous. When it gets bad, they can actually suffocate. It can be life-threatening, and so I wouldn't suggest that you just trust on the supplements. And if he's getting to a point of no return, no matter what you're doing, I believe that the surgery is a good idea when you get to that point. There's some downsides to the surgery, as there are for most surgeries, but the upside is they can keep breathing, and instead of suffocating to death just because the larynx doesn't open up and they can't get a breath in there. I've had, and the earlier you can treat these, the better they work. That's how it is with almost everything, early intervention. I've used lion's mane, I've used CBD because they all help with the neuropathies, with the polyneuropathies. I've also used acupuncture. I've also found that a soft laser, the cold laser that they use directly on the larynx itself, can also seem to help with that. It's a very tough problem. Don't wait too long and depend on the supplements alone to do the job. As much as, I think most people that want information about mushrooms are, a little bit wary of surgeries and pharmaceuticals and things like that, and I support that. But I think there's a time and a place. And certainly if it's a life-threatening condition in a relatively younger dog or a dog that has no other issues, then instead of letting them go, putting them to sleep, or having them die, tragically, by suffocation, I think the surgery is worth thinking about.
Yeah, it's tough, isn't it? Julie says, what, if any, mushrooms might help reduce the size of lipoma? Lipoma.
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 Yeah, lipoma. These are
Lipoma, sorry.
It's okay. No, that's all right. We're cool. These lipomas, they're fatty tumors. They're benign fatty tumors of adipose tissue. Fat cells go a little wild and they start multiplying and form these look like little jellyfish underneath the skin. They're actually quite common. I've got one somewhere here. I've got one on my arm, one on my back. And some dogs seem to have them more frequently. I've not had a lot of success using supplements, but there are some supplements that I've heard from other people seems to have worked for them, such as Chinese herbs that we use to help reduce the size of tumors and things like that. I generally tell people not to worry about them. Yeah, they're a little yucky to look at, but unless they're in a location where their growth is interfering with the movement of a joint or or some sort of biological action that's important, I wouldn't worry about them. And if you really want to remove them, then you can surgically. They're not that hard to take out surgically, and they don't tend to return. So if you're bringing your animal in, let's say for a dental, and it's got some lipomas, they're already under anesthesia. It wouldn't take the vet, most vets, too long to surgically remove those. But I have not found a good answer. A lot of it comes from the processed fats that they get in their commercial kibble. And some of it also can be part of a thyroid condition. If the thyroid's not working so well, they're not processing fats so well. I wish I had a good answer for you on this one. I'm sorry.
Robin asks how to get your dog to eat them. But as we know, companies like Real Mushrooms don't, it's not actually the mushroom, the round mushroom. It's a powder or what have you. But
Yeah, and you don't really want your dog to eat a raw mushroom anyway, because for one, they're not going to get the goodies because we have to somehow cook them to break down that fibrous cell wall. And there's some mushrooms which actually are mildly toxic when they're raw. Even our little white button mushrooms have a compound in them called agarotine that is mildly carcinogenic. Now, it's destroyed by cooking. It's also destroyed by refrigeration for a week. But but really eating them raw is fairly worthless, especially if you can cook them. So what we do is, for instance, this is empty, but for instance, one thing we do is with the mushroom powders, many of them are not that bad tasting. Lion's mane and cordyceps are very good tasting. Tremella, so you can just add the powder to the food. But that's one of the things I'm doing with Real Mushrooms is, putting them into these, tasty little treats, soft chews, or putting them into capsules, or mixing them in a powder and using some palatability factors. Like I'm really fond of krill meal. Krill meal is a great source of fatty acids, of fish oil type fatty acids, EPA, DHA, plus lecithin, plus has that really nice tidal pool smell that attracts many animals to it. So I like krill. I like nutritional yeast, which has kind of a cheesy taste to it. I like kelp powder, which is a little bit salty, So trying to, and trying to find ways to make it more palatable that don't involve using palatants that are allergenic, like chicken, things like that. Although sometimes that's the best we can do is using something that, because like reishi is so bitter that
I know Barbara's just said it's horrible.
yeah, but that it's it is, and in fact the reishi from real mushrooms, they do a dual extraction, so they actually concentrate the terpenes. It's the terpenes that are so bitter in the reishi, but that's also what gives reishi a superstar, because it has more terpenes than any other mushroom, and they've been well studied. They're really potent, and so you kind of want that bitterness. But if they're not going to take it, it's worthless. So putting it in a capsule is a good way to do. Or in here with this, we had to resort to a little bit of chicken liver to make it more palatable. We tried it first without. But reishi is an amazing mushroom.
Melina, she's in Athens, so it's very late for her. Asks, which mushrooms can support heart issues in dogs, and in which way?
Well, and when I say that this will work for dogs, it's not because we actually have a study. It's because I know what the action is of the mushroom. I know that it's used in people. I know that they've done testing of it in laboratory animals to determine these things. But for cardiac issues, the two mushrooms that we've heard quite a bit of this evening so far is the reishi mushroom, which is very good for the heart. And in fact, in Chinese medicine, the heart is considered to be the mind. And that's one reason why we see reishi so good for settling the mind, because it also helps to settle the heart. A while ago, I had an arrhythmia in my heart. I was kind of surprised to get that. And I found that as long as I was taking the reishi mushroom, I wouldn't get that. I'd stop taking it and it would kind of come back. I haven't had it for months and months and months. And, I think it's fairly minor. But so reishi is one, okay? And cordyceps is the other. And cordyceps is great for the heart, and they both can be really good. Now, exactly how they work is a little more complicated, but they can help to improve the contraction of the heart muscle. They can work on the cardiovascular system to lower the blood pressure so that you're not having as much counter pressure when the heart's pumping it out to all the tissues. And they also help with the mitochondrion, which is the energy powerhouse of the cell, to produce more energy in a very balanced and measured fashion. So it's not like you're getting a lot of energy and you're all jittery because of the kind of the caffeine that you're getting. So I would say those are two good mushrooms to think of when it comes to cardiac issues.
Yeah, cool. So I'm just going to go down the list of questions that have come in then. So okay. KDH says, my dog... I'm sorry, I'm giggling. My dogs get terrible gas that always runs me outside. Oh dear. Is there a way to help that? I have 2 corgi puppies. Thank you.
Well, I think we have to start with what they're eating,
diet.
And find
out. Sorry?
And find out what might be the offending ingredient. But things such as probiotics to help create a healthier digestive system, digestive enzymes. And digestive enzymes, the best digestive enzymes on the marketplace are derived from fungi, not necessarily mushrooms, but from fungi, although the mycelium of mushrooms does a really good job of digesting food. So, you need to look at the food, you need to look at those digestion boosters. And, you could certainly use a mushroom to help improve the microbiome, like the lion's mane from that study that we were discussing, or really any other mushroom because of its benefits. And that would be what I would look to do. And since it's both dogs, maybe they're related, but, I think the diet is probably the common ground there between the two.
Yeah. I'd say so. Wilma says, I have a question what can I do for my dog who is diagnosed with DM, degenerative myopathy?
We're getting all the big ones here, aren't we? So degenerative myelopathy, it's a lot like MS in humans, in that there are autoimmune issues with the spinal cord that interfere with its function. And it's a very, very big problem. And when it gets to a certain point of progression, it really is almost a point of no return. And oftentimes we mistake the early signs of it. So oftentimes it does get to a point of no return. But if you can catch it early, I have found that using acupuncture, especially electroacupuncture, using the soft laser, and then using supplements that are supportive of the immune system and supportive of the nervous system, like a high dose of fish oil, like the lion's mane, like the CBD. I think these can be very helpful, and there probably are a few others as well that we could add in there. But it's a difficult problem, and there aren't any easy answers for it.
Yeah, I'm really sorry, Wilma. That's horrible. Years ago, my very first Rottweiler had MMM, and you could see that his skull, like like that's an autoimmune thing as well. And yeah, you could literally see his skull coming through. It was horrible. But he set me on the path of kind of looking into natural remedies, and not that I ever went down the mushroom path. I didn't even know it was a thing. But yeah, I kind of, that it was because the original vet that I went to wanted to do the whole corticosteroids and all that, but I found a holistic vet, and yeah, it was a different protocol altogether. So it was really interesting. But you could literally see the muscles coming back on his head. It was crazy. But he died pretty soon after that of an osteosarcoma. So
yeah, Roddy, is that your favorite dog? Is that your favorite breed?
they're my heart breeds. I don't have one at the moment, but I love them. They're the best. Yeah,
and they are great dogs, but they do have bundled with them, a lot of problems, as does the Labrador and the Golden Retriever, and the Boxer. We've got. I mean, purebred dogs are wonderful, but they do oftentimes have these kinds of issues that come with them.
Yeah, for sure. Barbara says, I have a question, but maybe is too complex. Maybe you could point me to the answer. Too complex for the scope of this talk is what she was saying. Do you have a guide tip when to use a powdered mushroom, the fruiting body, and when to extract from the mushroom?
Well, I'm not quite sure I understand the question. The mushroom is the fruiting body, okay, and it is most potent and most bioavailable when we extract it using the hot water extraction technology, which involves heating it. Like let's say you're slicing mushrooms up and cooking it in a saute, you want to saute it at least for 15 minutes. Commercially, real mushrooms heats the dried powdered mushroom at 90 degrees centigrade for 2 hours to do that. But you'll get something started with 15 to 30 minutes of cooking. But I somehow suspect that your question has more to do with the products out there that are made from mycelium as compared to the products that are made from the actual fruiting body. And that's a big controversy. And I'm happy to share that with you if that's what the question was that you were asking. Is she live? Or was that a?
Yeah, no, she's here. Yeah.
Okay, could you refine that a little bit,
Germany.
Yeah.
Okay, well, while she's doing that, maybe we'll go on to the next question. So Tanya asks, will mushrooms help with multiple lipomas? If so, what would be the appropriate dosage for a 45 to 50-pound dog?
You said multiple lipomas?
Yeah.
Well, that answer would be the same as I had given about the single lipoma. Generally, with a powdered mushroom that's been extracted as more bioavailable, somewhere around 1/8 of a teaspoon of powder, maybe a 1/4 teaspoon of powder for every 10 pounds of body weight, once or twice daily, is kind of a place to start. And then from there, you could, if you're not getting results, you can continue to increase that. Mushrooms have shown themselves to be extremely safe. Most dogs, most people don't have reactions to them, but we do see some reactions, such as diarrhea, and some that may be just because of the amount of extra fiber they're getting. There are some people and some dogs that actually have allergic reactions to mushrooms. There's been written case reports in humans about a dermatitis secondary to shiitake mushroom ingestion. And generally, when you stop eating the mushroom, the problem goes away. And so it may be that it's either a specific mushroom or you're just not going to be able to take in very many mushrooms because of your sensitivity to it.
Okay, Stephanie says or asks, will mushrooms help a 17-year-old dog with severe chronic pancreatitis and seizures? Wow.
I think that they would be helpful. would they, cure these things or treat them or reduce the seizures? Not sure. I mean, there's epilepsy and seizures are kind of a very multimodal type of thing. It's not just everything is the same kind of epilepsy or same kind of seizure. So, but I do think that mushrooms could help to modify that. They could help to support that system. I just don't know in your animal, how well that would do. And certainly when we talk about epilepsy, we talk about neuro problems, then of course lion's mane does come to mind as being a good first line of defense there. And I've been recommending
chronic pancreatitis.
Well, the chronic pancreatitis part, what we've learned is that in order to better control chronic pancreatitis, not just about the diet, and it's not always about fats either. Some dogs are triggered by other types of foods, but what they have found that giving antioxidants daily to pets and humans who have chronic pancreatitis helps to reduce reoccurrences. Mushrooms are known to be very high in antioxidants. The mushroom that's the highest in antioxidants is the chaga mushroom, but they're all good. I mean, the lion's mane itself has good antioxidants in it, and because of its benefit to the digestive system, and particularly to the upper GI, of which the pancreas is part of, I think speaks highly about the use of lion's mane in that situation, both for epilepsy and for the GI issues.
And I know I don't think we can talk about CBD for the scope of this talk, but I'd love to get you back and talk about
Sure.
CBD next in the new year, because I think, with seizures as well, I imagine CBD would be indicated.
It can be very good for that. Not always curative, but it can help to modify the expression.
Susie Joy says, are there mushrooms that will strengthen and tone the urethral sphincter muscle to help normalize urinary retention? My 5-year-old rescued 7 months ago, was a breeder mum and then spayed. The resulting lack of estrogen may be a contributing factor to urinary incontinence, leakage. Also, her left adrenal gland is enlarged and plump.
Oh. So there may be a touch of what we call Cushing's disease there with that enlarged adrenal gland, and that oftentimes can contribute to an increased thirst and increased production of urine. And as an animal ages, as with people, sometimes that urinary sphincter weakens with age, with childbirth, with drugs, with all sorts of things. And this is a problem. Oftentimes they just drip a few little drops, maybe where they're sleeping. They'll leave a little, a small puddle around them. If it's a much larger puddle, then it might be a slightly different problem. So I don't have clinical evidence to support this, but if I were to choose a mushroom, and I would probably choose a Chinese herb and a mushroom, and maybe do acupuncture to really be most comprehensive with this, I would go for the cordyceps. Because the cordyceps not only has the cordyceps been shown to stimulate testosterone production, which could have an influence on that sphincter, but it also stimulates 17-beta estradiol. So typically what we do is we give an external source of estrogen in the form of DES, which is maybe not the best to give. And so by stimulating the estrogens in the system, that might naturally help it to overcome. Plus, if you look at how Chinese medicine describes the action of cordyceps, it's a yang tonic, and it also tonifies what's known as kidney jing. And it's the loss of the kidney yang energy that controls that lower sphincter, that when we're doing acupuncture or using Chinese herbs, we would be doing acupuncture and Chinese herbs to increase that kidney yang, and cordyceps does that too.
Yeah, okay. Alice asks, is there a mushroom to help with severely low platelets in my dog?
Well, we need to know why the plates are so low. They don't just happen by accident. There can be autoimmune problems. There can be even cancer. Could be drug toxicity. Not quite sure what that would be.
I can maybe answer that, because she's
Okay.
put another question down a bit lower, Alice. What mushrooms can help prevent sarcoma cell carcinoma? I can't. All these medical.
Squamous cell carcinoma.
Yeah. from recurring. So perhaps that's linked to the low platelets.
Maybe, or maybe
If
there
it's the
was.
same dog.
Yeah, generally we treat squamous cell by surgery, and surgery can be curative if you take a large enough piece, and a large enough margin around that tumor. Um, so yeah, I guess I would look at reishi and cordyceps again. We kind of sound like a broken record here. Reishi in particular, we think of for autoimmune disease, if in fact that's what's happening here. We do know that all mushrooms have a positive benefit on stem cells that are in the bone marrow, and that's where the platelets come from. So they can help to normalize and regulate that. I can't promise you that using the mushrooms is going to work for that, but theoretically, that would be part of what I would use. I wouldn't use it as a standalone. I'd want to learn more about, why the platelets are low or what was used to treat the squamous cell carcinoma. But those beta glucans in those mushrooms can help to keep the cancer at bay. And although we think of turkey tail quite a bit when it comes to cancer, and certainly that would be a good mushroom to use, when we're looking at the platelet function, that the turkey tail could also benefit the platelet stem cells as well. So, but I would, maybe a turkey tail and reishi could be a good blend for there. I'm kind of, shooting in the dark because I don't know the details, but that would be my choices, my suggestions.
We have got a storm starting here. I just heard a great big roll of thunder. My dog's
I'm freaking out.
scared. No, I'm just, if I lose connection or something, I don't think I will, but I'm just saying just in case. So
You got a Tuverne? Is that a Tuverne you have?
No, he's a Malinois. Yeah.
A Malinois. Okay,
Malinois.
All I could see were the ears. All I could see were the ears, and there's
he literally just jumped on my lap and he's shaking. So
poor boy.
Okay, Stephanie says, I got here so late. It's okay, Steph. We haven't actually talked about allergies. So her pug's got allergies, and they seem to be environmental allergies, worse in spring and fall.
Okay, well, with food allergies, we can eliminate the food. With environmental allergies, it's hard to eliminate the environment. So there's a number of ways that we try to reduce their sensitivity to things they're sensitive to. And what happens when they have an allergy is that it stimulates their mast cells to because of the antigens and antibody complex that happen. It stimulates the mast cells to release histamine, which then produces the symptoms that we see of allergies. So with environmental allergies, the conventional approach is to first of all determine what they're allergic to. And they do that with a blood test, which is pretty effective. More accurately, at least according to the dermatologists, are the little the sub-intradermal skin testing, where they take the antigens and put little blebs underneath the skin, and they find out which ones have the biggest reactions. That's supposed to be more accurate than the blood test. But nonetheless, from that, what they'll do is they'll create a custom formula that has very, very small amounts of these allergens that the animal is sensitive to, and then they have the pet parent inject those back into the dog, starting with teeny amounts. And the idea is to gradually get the immune system to develop tolerance when it's exposed to those antigens. And sometimes that works. It can take a while. It's not the best. I mean, we now have these drugs that are very popular, and people aren't doing the skin testing, the Apoquel and the Cytopoint, and they may have different names in the countries that you're at, but they're basically, monoclonal antibodies. They're immune modulators that work on the chemical messengers of allergies that create the symptoms. It doesn't really stop the allergies. It just stops the symptoms in the same way that steroids did, but steroids are so bundled with so many problems, we don't want to use them unless we have to or have no other choice. So, long-winded, what we have found is that two mushrooms in particular, the reishi mushroom, again, I love that mushroom, and the chaga mushroom, I mentioned that before as being good for chronic pancreatitis because it has the highest amount of antioxidants in that, have these terpenes, talking about the terpenes in them, that they stabilize mast cell membranes. They're not actually antihistamines, but because they prevent the mast cell from releasing histamine, they're functionally antihistamines. And so we get good feedback from human environmental allergy sufferers that when they take, we have a combination product called 5 Defenders that has 5 mushrooms in it, including the reishi and the chaga and turkey tail and shiitake and maitake, that when they take that it actually gives them relief from the symptoms. So, I mean, when we talk about allergies, one, we're trying to deal with the symptoms because they're yucky, but two, we try to see if there's some way that we can modulate the immune system to have a better response to these things that are really non-toxic, and yet the immune system reacts to them as though they're going to kill you. A little grain of pollen is not very toxic, but for some reason the immune system thinks that it's something that needs to be dealt with in a very strong way.
And also allergies start in the gut, don't they? So if mushrooms help the gut,
well, yeah, the microbiome can have a very strong supportive effect on environmental allergies, and they have done studies where they found that things that help to improve the health in the gut, even probiotics, can be very good to help with the overall picture of reducing the allergies. And I've heard of numbers of anecdotal stories about improving the health of the gut, maybe even going to the whole fecal transplant route, and seeing improvements that way, especially when you have to be careful about where you're getting the poop from when you're doing a fecal transplant, because if the animal had allergies that you're getting the stool from, then that microbiome that you're implanting in this other animal could create other allergies as well. It's interesting. But gut health is important. Gut health rules everything. Absolutely.
Yeah. Heidi says her 12 and a half year old dog has a fungal infection that has been treated with Malaseb baths and Doxo 5-3 or something. It was getting better, and then he got a respiratory infection, which when he was boarded, that was treated with Baytril and Cavamox. Those didn't help much, so I started giving him 2 homeopathic remedies, professional formulas, viral immune stimulator, and asthma drops. He refused to take those, so I'm now giving him Highland bioplasma cell salts. He's doing better, but his skin condition is getting worse. Any suggestions? It's a tough one.
Yeah. I mean, you've tried a lot of things. I'm surprised he would accept the homeopathics. They're usually pretty bland tasting. So that's interesting. Well, there's a mushroom I haven't spoken about yet, and it's called tremella. And tremella in Asia is a prized edible mushroom called the snow fungus. And it's very interesting because it has a special polysaccharide in it that's different than other mushrooms, which functions a lot like hyaluronic acid. And so it helps to support the health of the skin. It actually provides some moisture retention, helps to make the skin moister. In Asia and now in the Western world, we're seeing tremella being used as part of topical and oral, what we call cosmeceuticals. These are supplements that are used to help improve the complexion, and a lot of positive feedback from its use. So I would say something like that would probably be a good place to start. And I'm not sure. Probably reishi. I would probably use the reishi and tremella combination, just because of the strength of reishi to help with these immune-mediated conditions, and because its ability to help reduce, some of the allergy symptoms. And you combine that with tremella, which is supportive of the skin. Now, I mean, there's other things. I think fatty acids like fish oil, very, very important. And having a good high dosage of fish oil also naturally reduces inflammation. Looking at what the dog is eating has got to be very, very important. And then, of course, as we're talking about this, and Ness so wisely, suggested, we also have to look at the microbiome and digestive system. So we treat the whole animal. We don't just treat the symptom that's out of whack. We treat the whole animal to get the whole system back into whack, if that's a word.
Wayne Keller just says thank you for having you on, and that he's met you and he hopes to see you again someday. He says you're a great guy and knows a lot about different topics.
I paid him a lot to say that too.
Yeah. Circling back to Barbara from Germany, was just talking about. Yeah. So according to what I read, powdered mushrooms and extract from the same type of mushroom have slightly different chemical compositions. Of course, an extract is more potent, but also is missing an example minerals and other compounds. So the question is there a guide to your knowledge and experience when to use the powder or when to use the extract? This is why I mostly use 50-50 powdered and 50-50 extract.
Well, your powdered mushrooms are not going to be as bioavailable as your hot water extracts. And I don't actually agree with you that the hot water extracts necessarily are lacking anything. I think that because they're more bioavailable, they're more accessible to the body to use. Most of the active ingredients in the mushroom are very, very heat tolerant. So we're not really, no, it's not like we're using it like an herb, like cannabis or some other herb, where the terpenes are very small terpenes and they blow off very easily or destroyed by temperature. So I don't actually agree with you on that one in terms of what you're doing. And I think I would just look for extracts. But my suggestion when it comes to an extract, because they use numbers to define how concentrated it is, my suggestion is to look for a 1-to-1 extract. This is the best, in my opinion, because what they do is after they make the extraction, they have the extracted active ingredients in the liquid, and then they have all that fiber that they aren't getting, that still has some stuff in it, but they didn't get everything out of it completely. So I like the 1-to-1 takes the liquid part, and then that solid part that have been extracted and separated puts them back together. They don't rejoin and create a sturdy fiber cell wall again, but this way you get it all. You get the beta glucans, you get which are bioavailable, you get the chitin that's bioavailable, and then you get all of the stuff in the liquid as well. So I think that may solve your problem. 50-50, that's kind of what you're talking about, a 1-to-1, but you need to have that extraction, because without the extraction, it's going to be a lot harder for your body to take the goodies out of that dried mushroom powder.
Susie asks, are there mushrooms that dilute urine?
Yeah, I think there are actually mushrooms that have more of a kind of a diuretic effect. And in particular, there's one mushroom that's very commonly used in Chinese medicine. It's a polypore, and it's related to maitake. It's called Grifola umbulatus, and it's commonly used in Chinese herbal formulas for bladder infections and things like that. And it works in part as a diuretic, because we know that if you can flush more fluid through that bladder, you can get a lot of those pathogens out of there while you're treating that infection.
Alice, just to clarify what she was talking about earlier, she says the squamous cell was removed, and these are two different dogs, and they haven't diagnosed why one of the dogs has got the low platelets. He's currently on prednisone. This is less than a week ago, so yeah.
Right, and I mean and prednisone is a great drug when used properly, especially when you know what you're treating. But they're worried about this dog maybe having excessive bleeding. They don't know how to fix it, and it is a go-to in conventional medicine when we're stumped, and it could help to restore the platelets, but it may have to be used ongoing. And ongoing, the use of pred for more than a week starts to create some problems in the body. It increases thirst, increases urination, increases appetite, affects the liver, affects the adrenal glands, and so long-term use can be problematic, but it also is a good rescue drug. I mean, there's times when you have to use those kinds of things and when you don't know what's going on. I would say for that, you don't know what's going on, and I would use the reishi in that context because most commonly a low platelet is an immune issue. It's called idiopathic thrombocytopenia, ITP is what they call it. And the conventional way, the kind of idiot way to treat it, I don't mean the conventional people are idiot, but it's very simple, is with a steroid like pred. And then maybe even a stronger drug like cyclosporin, which is an immune suppressant, but all of which have issues long-term in the system. So try the reishi.
Mercedes asks, can turkey tail work for a toxic liver?
So elevated liver enzymes, is that what a toxic liver is? Um, I would say turkey tail certainly could. It does have evidence that it is valuable for the liver, as reishi is as well. Probably reishi is a little better known than turkey tail, but turkey tail is good. In fact, most mushrooms are good for the liver. So I would do that, but I wouldn't use that as a standalone. I would definitely get some silymarin in there from milk thistle. And then there's an amino acid called N-acetylcysteine, or NAC. That's really good for toxic liver. And then there's another, a dual antioxidant called alpha lipoic acid. And so the silymarin, the NAC, the ALA, or alpha lipoic acid, is a great triad to use to treat toxic liver, and the reishi would be supportive of that as well.
Wayne asks, what mushrooms would prevent a UTI to help a dog with a UTI, or to help a dog with a UTI?
Well, I think this mushroom that I described, this Polyporus umbellatus, would be helpful for that. But and possibly, the antimicrobial benefits in terms of stimulating the immune system. But I would, for prevention of a UTI or concurrent with a UTI, I would definitely add some cranberry in there. Cranberry is great. It helps to coat the bladder lining so that the bacteria don't adhere to it, and bacteria need to adhere to the bladder lining in order for them to create pathology. So, but I don't, there's no one mushroom that specifically speaks to me, but I do know that mushroom I mentioned, that is used in many complicated Chinese formulas for UTIs.
Yeah. Susie just is clarifying her question about diluting the urine. She says her vet is concerned that her Golden's urine is usually not concentrated enough. So the dilute urine is problematic. The question is how to increase to a normal level and the concentration of the urine. Okay.
Well, we need to know kind of why, he's not concentrating it. And generally, when they don't concentrate the urine, it is either a kidney issue or possibly an adrenal issue, like this Cushing's I was sort of referring to earlier. So that's what, so we need to find out, what is the problem and if we can do something about it. The mushroom that is best for the kidneys, though, and certainly wouldn't hurt for you to give it a go, would be cordyceps. And cordyceps is known to be very protective of the kidneys. In fact, I recommend cordyceps for cats. It's actually a very tasty powdered mushroom, and it can help to protect the kidneys. And we know that cats are most sensitive, and like 85% of all chronic kidney disease cases in veterinary species are in cats. So they definitely are a species at risk. So cordyceps might be worthwhile looking at for this dog that has dilute urine of unknown origin.
Barbara just said thank you in regards to the extract powdered question. That is always valuable opinion from the expert. iPhone user, I don't know what their name is. She's asking about, did we talk about anxiety? We did talk about anxiety. So we might go to the next question. If there are people that have come in late, I will be putting this up on my YouTube channel, and I'll type the name of that in the chat in a minute. So you can always go back and review what you've missed. I'll do that. But so we'll go to the next question. So Susie says, can cordyceps be used with 5 defenders? My vet prescribed 5 defenders for general immune function. Or should we focus on cordyceps and stop the 5 defenders?
I'm not sure I know what you're applying them for, but there's no reason why you can't use a lot of different mushrooms at the same time. There's no reason at all. What you want to make sure is that the mushrooms of importance in terms of what you're trying to address are in high enough levels to make a difference. So, with the 5 defenders, you've got maybe 20% of each of them to make up, a single capsule. Whereas, for a single mushroom like cordyceps or turkey tail, you'd have 100%. of that mushroom in that capsule, so you could achieve a much higher dosage. Or if you were using the powder, if it were palatable to the animals, you could then, you would then you would have to give a lot more of the five defenders in order to get enough potency of any one of the individual mushrooms for that to work. The five defenders is really good for a lot of problems. It's good as a general wellness thing. It's good for, we've had good results of it with seasonal allergies, as I've mentioned. But when you're dealing with some of these problems that are really pretty intense, like cancer and autoimmune disease, or other types of immune-mediated diseases, you may need to use pretty high dosages, and it makes it easier if you're using a single mushroom or if you're using a couple of different single mushrooms. Like, for instance, a cancer patient could do well with the five defenders, which has the reishi and the turkey tail and the chaga and the shiitake and maitake, but you really would have to give enough to make sure you're getting enough of any one of them to make a difference. And we don't have enough objective studies where we've actually measured the dosage against the response, speaking to the five defenders. So a lot of this is kind of theoretical, just knowing that we need to dose pretty high for the individual thing. So I would use the five defenders because it kind of touches all the bases. And then if you think the cordyceps is what's right, in terms of the things I've mentioned earlier for your critter, then I would add that cordyceps in and maybe keep that cordyceps at a higher level to address the specific problem that you're addressing. I know it's kind of general, but
yeah, okay. It can only be general, though, isn't it? And without
I'm not really allowed to give medical advice, so forget everything I just said.
No. But in terms of, you don't have the specific dog's medical history and all that sort of stuff. But exactly. I think what is really something that you did touch on right at the beginning was how some medications, whether prescribed or whether natural, it doesn't matter, that some are going to work better with some dogs than others. And that's an important, we have to look at the dog in front of us and say, is this working or isn't it working?
Yes. Absolutely.
And Susie has asked, do you do telemedicine consultations?
I do not, and I'm sorry for that. And it's kind of I don't know if I'd call it a selfish reason, but they take so much time, and I really don't have that time. I'm strapped enough for my time to do what I'm doing. I'm trying to create an online platform where instead of doing one-on-one telemedicine, we do like a group of people who have similar issues that we could have a conversation like this, and we can all learn from each other. And for me, that would be a much more efficient way of using my time and to still help the animals. And so since the publication of the book, I wanted to wait for the publication of the book because it's a good platform to use. It has a lot of information, so I don't have to generate all these documents. I could refer you to a page where I've got a protocol, or information. And so that's kind of what I have in mind. And we're trying to get that together. Probably the first thing we're going to do will be just a live free webinar on some topic that's interesting to people. And I'll do like maybe 15 minutes of a little slide presentation to give you some basic information. And then we'll open the floor to questions. And initially, I'm going to have these things be free to kind of build up some traffic. And then obviously I have to bear expenses to do this and everything. And then we'll charge some sort of a subscription fee or a single pay as you go, but they'll be quite low, quite reasonable. Some of the charges that are made for these live things, I think, are a bit extravagant, personally.
And the book is, there's a mushroom for that.
Yes, the book is, there's a mushroom for that. Right.
And there's people that already have it and love it, which is amazing because it's only very new, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just 2 months old. It's only been out for 2 months. Yeah.
That's brilliant. Okay, if there's no more questions, we might let Dr. Rob go because he's given us a lot of his valuable time. Barbara says it's going on her must-have list. Well, Christmas is literally a few days away, so buy yourself that for Christmas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this has been great. I really appreciate everyone's enthusiasm. Maybe we can schedule something like this again in the future.
Absolutely. I'd love to have you back on to talk
Yeah.
about mushrooms, but also that conversation about CBD would be
Yeah,
amazing.
I think there's a lot of misconceptions about cannabis in general and CBD, about how you dose it, how it works, and I've worked out a lot of that stuff. So I've got some good info on that as well.
Do you mind? I've just got Wilma's just mentioned
Sure.
her dog is the one with the DM.
So,
And I saw a Summer of Ness with you, and I could download an ebook. Oh, the ebook. Yes. That link is working now. I can resend it to you. I saw that Lion's Mane and Reishi could help with DM. I know
yes,
that
they
DM
can.
is not curable. Yeah. She
So
visited the website, Real Mushrooms, but they don't send mushrooms for animals to the Netherlands. They suggested I go to iHerb.
yes,
They didn't have lion's manes for animals there either, but they said I could use the lion's manes and
yes.
reishi people. That is 1,000 milligrams per serving. We would. How much does your dog weigh? She says, how much can she give her dog?
Yeah, well, we know how much I mentioned that generic dosing of an eighth to a quarter of a teaspoon for 10 pounds of body weight once or twice daily. It's the sort of thing you can kind of escalate the dosage as it appears as you may need to give more. And the pouches, which have the bulk powder in them, are available globally. The pet labeled products, many of these distributors aren't ready to bring them on yet. So that's really the problem. That's why you're not seeing it. And there's not as much popularity or interest in all of the different species of mushrooms amongst pet owners. We originally launched I think 5 or 6 different single mushroom capsules that were pet sized, and we had such poor sales that now we only have the lion's mane, the turkey tail, and the 5 defenders in the smaller pet capsules. We're looking to create pet labeled bulk products because the local regulatory agencies, the FDA, don't like you to promote the sale of a human product for a pet any more than they like you to promote the sale of a pet product for a human. They like everybody to stay in their lanes. So, I've only been with them 2.5 years, and we're just kind of getting things ramped up. We have a new product coming out in the next month, specifically for cats, called Functional Feline. That follows a product we launched earlier this year called the Daily Dog. These are all-in-one meal toppers that have active probiotics in them, detoxicants, and a bunch of mushrooms, and meant to be just kind of a wellness thing, not to necessarily treat disease. We've got soft chews coming out soon for mobility. So we've got a bunch coming. It just takes time to get this all done right and to get it done according to the high standards that we have. But iHerb is one. And then there's another one down where you are, Ness, in Australia, but I can't remember the name of it. I'm so sorry. Anyway, so yes, use the powder for your dog with DM, and the reishi powder may be a bit difficult, but you can get the reishi in the larger sized capsules, and that's a good way to give that one as well. And I would start. I always never start at the ultimate top dosage because dogs can have reactions, cats can have reactions, especially if you're starting with a large amount. Start low, go slow, gradually build it up. Now I know the clock's ticking with DM, and we want to try to get these things in there as soon as we can, but we don't want to have an adverse reaction to it, because then you're going to move forward 2 steps, back 3, and you're not going to be able to really get things to be working the way you want to have them work for your dog. So yeah, that's what I would do for you there in the Netherlands.
Oh,
And
and
I'm sure there's a pretty good mushroom industry, in Europe and in the Netherlands, and you may be able to find other sources of products that aren't real mushrooms there, and they may also be good. I can only speak to what I know,
and Stephanie just asks, would you give them open up the capsule or give them the capsule? I guess that would depend on the dog, wouldn't it?
yeah, that's the reason I said the capsule. It's in the capsule because it's not very tasty. So that's why the tastiest mushrooms that I have found by experience in dogs and cats are the tremella, the lion's mane, and the cordyceps. Now, the shiitake is not bad, but we don't have an individual shiitake. I mean, everyone loves shiitake. And the maitake, which is one of the most prized edible mushrooms in the world, we do currently have that both in capsules and in bulk powder. So that could also be given, just as a powder. And I keep talking to people every day who say, "Oh yeah, my dog loves that reishi powder." I go, "Geez," and I hated it to begin with. Quite frankly, it was so bitter. But now I'm putting like a gram or half a teaspoon in each cup of tea I drink, and I'm used to it. So it's also
yeah.
a matter of getting used to it. So one trick with getting things into critters that might be a little reluctant is to start with an eensy teensy amount. And just keep using that amount in the food daily as they get used to that small taste, and then start adding a little more, and a little more, and a little more until you get it up to a level that could be a therapeutic. This is especially important to do with cats. It seems to work better. It seems to work well with cats if they'll even accept that first little bit, in the food. If they don't accept that first little bit to food, then try a different mushroom.
All right, we'll leave it there. I've actually got a class in 5 minutes, so I have to get off here anyway. Dr. Rob, thank you so much, and thank you everybody for joining us. And I hope we'll see you all in 2025.
Yeah, Happy New Year to everyone, and have a very wonderful holiday season.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, thank you everybody. See you.